Thank you families for joining us tonight. It is currently 5:21 and our presentation will begin at 5:30. Thank you for your patience. Thank you families for joining us tonight. It is currently 5:27 and our presentation will begin at 5:30. Thank you for your patience. Good evening and welcome to today's parent virtual meeting. We are with Modesto City Schools and our team is the Student, Parent, and Community Support Services Department. Our team members are Mary Herrera, Patty Munoz, Stephanie Hoyos, Cynthia Gutierrez, and Rafael Arroyo. We are so happy that you have decided to join us. Tonight, we'll be discussing different ways students can receive financial aid for college. Before we get started, there are a couple of important items to cover. During this presentation, you will only be able to listen because it is a live event. However, please select Q&A on the right side of your screen. You can type in your questions anytime during this event under My Questions, and we will try our very best to answer as many questions as possible at the end of this presentation. You can also ask a question anonymously as well. At the end of this presentation, there will be a short survey posted in the Q&A section under the Featured tab. We would really appreciate it if you can take a few moments to fill out the survey, as it will help us with any recommendations you may have for future parent classes and/or presentation topics. Also, by completing the survey, you will automatically be entered into our free giveaway for a refurbished desktop computer. We will draw a name after the meeting and will notify the winner by the end of November. So please make sure to add your name and phone number, which will be the last question on the survey. For live caption languages, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, you can select the gear icon for captions or subtitles and then choose your language. So let's get started. For today's presentation, we would like to welcome Tammy Worthington, a financial aid advisor with CSU Stanislaus. Thank you for presenting to our parents today. Please share your screen and turn on your mic and video. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So tonight we're going to be talking about financial aid, but first, my name is Tammy Worthington, and I am from CSU Stanislaus. Now, the presentation is going to be general financial information, so it's not just if you're going to Stanislaus. It's also if you're going to go to a community college or a private school or a UC. I'm just going to be giving general information about financial aid. So it doesn't matter what kind of school you're looking at, it is going to cover all of that. So what we're going to go over tonight is we're going to go over the different types of aid. We're going to go over the application mistakes, that most common mistakes that are made on the application, and the financial aid process. So let's get started. So financial aid comes from a number of different places. The federal government, state government, institutions have, like different colleges have financial aid, as well as private donors have financial aid. But all financial aid lands into one of these four types. So those are scholarships, grants, work study, and loans. So let's talk about each one of those individually. So we'll start out with scholarships. This is probably something that you're most used to hearing about, most familiar with. A scholarship, a donor says, I'll help you out with your college education by giving you X amount of dollars. So that's a scholarship. Scholarships are money that you don't generally have to pay back. And it's usually from an off-campus donor or the college that you're planning on attending. The best places to look for scholarships is the actual high school that you're currently attending. You want to contact the counseling office. A lot of times they have them listed on their website, or they have a newsletter that has the different scholarships, because the high school that you're attending, they know about all the scholarships that students from your area have gotten in the past. And if a donor from your area wants to give a scholarship, usually they contact the high school counseling office to let them know what it's about so they can let their students know. The next best place to check is the college that you're planning on attending. So if you're planning on going to Stanislaus, we have on-campus scholarships, and it's on our website. There's one application. It's up already, and the deadline is March 2nd. Other colleges also have on-campus scholarships, and those are scholarships for students who are planning on attending their school. Now, colleges also a lot of times will list off-campus scholarships. These are scholarships that you may not have to be a student at their school to get. So Stanislaus has a whole page of other scholarships that is a resource for our students, but you could also go on there and see those off-campus scholarships, even if you're not planning on going to Stanislaus. Feel free to use it as a resource. Other colleges also do that. I know my daughter was considering Pepperdine, and so we were looking around on their website, and they have a whole bunch of scholarships listed, and they have them organized by the deadlines. So, you know, in October, these scholarships need to have their deadline be submitted. And they weren't scholarships, a lot of them, for students going to Pepperdine. They were just general scholarships. So feel free to use other campus websites as a resource for finding scholarships as well. Another place to check for scholarships that people don't generally think about is your parents' employer. A lot of times employers have scholarships for dependents of their employees, and where you would check is the Human Resources Office. Your parents could just contact them, find out if they have any scholarships that you can apply for. A lot of unions, Elks clubs, Rotary, they all have scholarships available as well. And then there's internet web searches like fastweb.com. It's a free internet web search. You go in there, you answer a bunch of questions. It will go out onto the internet and look for scholarships that you may be eligible for and create a list for you to apply for. A couple more things about scholarships is you need to be aware if there's something additional that you need to do once you get a scholarship. So when you get a scholarship, they will either give you a certificate or a letter saying, hey, you've gotten this scholarship. You want to read that and make sure you know if there's anything else you need to do. So for example, if Stanislaus offered you a scholarship, a soccer scholarship, we would require that you play soccer to get that scholarship. So there's something more you need to do. A really common thing is what's called a verification of enrollment. So the donor actually requires that you get the college that you are enrolled at to complete this form so they know which school to send the money to. I recommend that you treat scholarship search like it's a part-time job, because a lot of times you apply for a lot of different scholarships and only maybe get a few, and it can be disconcerting. But if you treat it like a job, so you, like, let's say every week you put an hour into applying for scholarships, or every month you put in 2 hours, and then let's say you put 10 hours into doing a scholarship search and you only get one scholarship. That seems really disappointing, right? But what if that scholarship was $1,000? You actually made $100 an hour, which is a pretty good job. So if you look at it that way, sometimes it's not as disappointing or discouraging. The next type of aid is grants. Grants are money that you don't have to pay back, like scholarships, but they can be from the federal government, state government. Institutions also have grants. So the main federal grant program is called the Pell Grant. And a lot of people have heard of that. A lot of times the parents have gotten the Pell Grant when they went to school. It's been around for a long time. The main state grant program is the Cal Grant, and we'll talk a little bit about that on the next couple slides. And then institutions also have grants. So like the community colleges have the Promise Grant program. The CSUs have state university grant, UCs have their own grants, and private schools also have grants. The only reason you would really want to know where your grants are coming from is if you decide, you know what, I'm going to transfer to another school, or I'm thinking about going to a different school. If it's a federal grant like the Pell Grant, you can take that grant to any school. It's going to be the same Pell Grant you get at MJC would be the same Pell Grant you would get at Harvard. It's any school in the United States that's eligible for financial aid, you would then be eligible for that Pell Grant at that school. Now, the Cal Grant, because it's a state grant, you can only get the Cal Grant at a California school. You can't take your Cal Grant to University of Oregon because you have to attend a California school. That's part of the requirements. And then institutional, like if you got a state university grant at CSU Stanislaus, even though Fresno State is also a CSU, they have their own pot of money because it's an institutional grant. So you would have to be awarded from their state university grant, and they may have different eligibility criteria. So that's the only reason you would need to know where the grant comes from. But their grants are money that you don't have to pay back. Now, the Cal Grant program, to be eligible for the Cal Grant, you would have to do your FAFSA or DREAM Act, which is the application. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, or the California DREAM application, by March 2nd. That is a hard and fast deadline. You cannot apply after that date and get a Cal Grant. You would also need to do what's called a Cal Grant GPA verification form by that date. Now, if you're a senior, your high school is going to do that for you this year. And so you don't have to worry about that. But I am going to mention that because if you decide to take a year off, a gap year, you would then be responsible the next year to take care of that GPA verification. You would need to print out the form, take it to your high school counseling office. They would then fill it out, and you would be responsible for mailing it in and getting it to the California Student Aid Commission, the Cal Grant people, before the March 2nd deadline. Also, if you don't get a Cal Grant your first year at college, you have one more year to try and get into the program, and you would then need to do the GPA verification. You would, again, like I said, print it out, take it back to your high school, have them help you fill it out, and then get it in by that March 2nd. But this year, as a senior, your high school sends electronically your GPA, so you don't have to worry about that. To be eligible for the Cal Grant, you also have to be a California resident, and you have to, like I said, attend a California school for next year. To get a Cal Grant, there's 3 things that you need to do. Once after you've got the email from the California Student Aid Commission saying you potentially have a Cal Grant, you need to go into their system, which is called Web Grants for Students, and you need to create an account. So once you get that email from the California Student Aid Commission, go in and make an account on Web Grants. Then you also need to claim a school, because on your applications, either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, you can list up to 10 colleges to get your financial information from your application. So they do not know which school you're planning on attending until you claim your school. So once you know which school you're going to, you need to go into Web Grants for Students and you need to claim that school, because your Cal Grant can only be on one school's roster. Now, if you get to like April and you've narrowed it down to like 2 schools, but you're still not completely sure, I would still recommend that you go in and claim the school that you most likely will be attending. And then if you don't attend that school, you can always go in and do a school change. That's very easy to do, but you don't want to put it off and forget to claim your school and then somehow lose your Cal Grant because you didn't do that. The other thing that students a lot of times miss doing is certifying their high school graduation. To be eligible for Cal Grant, you have to have graduated from high school. And so right now, we don't know if you're going to. We believe you will. We have faith that you will, but you actually have to go on after you graduate and verify your high school graduation on Web Grants for Students. So you might want to just mark that on your calendar in June to go in and do that. So all of those things that you need to do, you need to go to Web Grants for Students. The website is on the screen. And this is where you're going to go in and create your account. You're going to monitor your Cal Grant. You'll be able to go in once you log in and see how much your Cal Grant is at different schools, because there's different types of Cal Grant, and then the amounts of the Cal Grant is different depending on if you go to a UC or go to a community college or go to a CSU. So we've talked about scholarships and grants. So work study is the next type of financial aid. Work study is a federal program, and it is a job on or off campus. So all of the different colleges kind of treat these work study a little bit different. So you'll have to find out from your school how they handle getting a work study job. On your FAFSA, you're going to mark, it has a question that asks, are you interested in work study? I recommend that you always mark yes to that, unless you absolutely know that you already have a job you're going to continue doing and you're not going to be interested in a work study position. So if you mark yes and then end up not wanting it or not using it, you can always decline it, but you need to answer yes to be considered. So there's lots of different jobs that you can do. And some schools, like I said, they handle it differently. So like our school, so Stan State, we list all of our work study jobs on our website about 2 weeks before the semester starts. The student, if they have been awarded work study on their award, they will then go to whatever department it is that has listed the job. So like, let's say the psychology department, and they will apply with the person that the contact person there. There will be an interview process like with any job. And then if they decide to hire you, they do the paperwork and hire you. Other schools, some of them, you do one application and then they find the job and assign the job to you. So you need to find out from, if you're awarded work study, how it works on their campus. There's lots of different jobs that you can do on our campus. We have everything from lab assistants to people who give tickets And the parking, for parking, we love those students. We even have students that go out into the elementary schools and tutor students and helping to teach them to read. So there's lots of different jobs that you can do, and they are work study. Now, what's different about work study versus another job that you would do, like let's say working for Kohl's? What's the advantage is, since work study is considered financial aid, when you fill out your FAFSA the next year, there you will put your amount of money that you made as wages, but then there's another question that asks, of your wages, how much was work study? So you enter the number there and it takes it out of the calculation, because that's not resources for next year. That was financial aid for last year. So it actually doesn't get in the calculation for your FAFSA. The other thing that is a good thing about work study is they know you're a student. They know that being a student is a priority for you. So they know that there's finals, they know that there's, midterms, things like that. So a lot of times they're a lot more lenient with your schedule and work around your classes. So like you could get a job, potentially, do a couple classes, go to your job for a couple hours, then go back to class. You wouldn't even have to lose your parking space, and you would be able to do that on campus. So that's work study. Work study is a really good program as well. And then the last type of financial aid is loans. Loans are money that need to be paid back. There are two main types of student loans, the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan. A really good resource about loans would be studentloans.gov. The website is on the PowerPoint. If you think that you may have to take loans, I would recommend that you go to this website and just look around. It has repayment calculators. It has insurance counseling that tells you all your rights and responsibilities. It talks about all the different things about loans. Now, a student loan is a little bit different than other types of loans, like your mortgage or your car payment, in that it has things called deferments. So a deferment, one of the main types of deferments that students use is what's called the enrollment deferment. So if a student, let's say you get out with your 4-year degree, you get into the workforce and you find that you can't do the job that you want with just a 4-year degree, you need a master's. So you go back to school. If you go back to school and are at least half time, you would then be able to put your loans in deferment with an in-school deferment. So that means you would be able to not have to pay them while you are in school. Now, like I said, there's two main types of loans, the subsidized and unsubsidized. The only difference between the two is who pays the interest while you're in school. So the subsidized is subsidized by the government, and they pay the interest while you're in school. So while you're in school, you're not paying principal, you're not paying interest. After you graduate or drop below half-time status, you're going to go into repayment, and that's when you would start paying the principal and interest. The unsubsidized, you don't pay the principal while you're in school, but you would be responsible for paying the interest, and you would pay it on a quarterly basis. You can choose to, instead of paying the interest while you're in school, have it accrue, which means adds up. So let's say you take an unsubsidized loan for $2,000 while you're in school, $200 of interest adds up. When you go into repayment, which is 6 months after you graduate or drop below half-time status, you actually will have a loan for $2,200. The original $2,000 plus the $200 of interest added up. Okay, so those loans, the student loans, these are all in the student's name. The student's responsible for paying them back. The next type of loan is the Parent Plus loan. This loan is in the parent's name. The parent is responsible for paying it back, and the parent starts paying it back while the student is still in school. Now, there are opportunities to have deferments and that kind of thing, but you would have to work with your lender on that. Now, the parent does have to go through a process where we're going to check their credit score and see if they're eligible for the Parent Plus loan. If this parent is not eligible for the Parent Plus loan, then the student would be offered additional unsubsidized loan. So that's the different types of aid. To get any of those types of aid, except for some scholarships, you have to apply using one of these two applications, either the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, or the California Dream Act application. And the websites are on the screen. Now, most students are going to be doing the FAFSA. The California Dream Act are for non-resident students like AB 540 students who are not US citizens. If you're not sure which application to do, start with the Dream Act application because it has questions at the beginning that will help you determine if you should do the FAFSA or not. So if you don't know which one to do, you're not a US citizen, you would then do the Dream Act and do the questions. And if it determines you're eligible to do the FAFSA, it'll tell you to go over and do the FAFSA. Okay. So what the FAFSA and the Dream Act do is and I'm going to be using FAFSA and Dream Act. The questions are pretty much the same on both applications. So I'm going to be using them interchangeably, but most of the information is the same for no matter which application that you do. So both of them, they collect the financial and household information and they put it into this calculation and it spits out a number, which is called the EFC. And the EFC stands for Estimated Family Contribution, but that's a little misleading because it sounds like if you have an EFC of 3,000, then you would have to pay $3,000 for your student to go to school, and that's not true. It is more of an index. It is a number that helps us determine what the student is eligible for. It's a number that helps us to compare one household to the other household to determine which one has greater need. So it's going to take all of the information you put in your FAFSA and it's going to put it into that calculation to determine the EFC. Okay? The FAFSA and the Dream Act are always available as of October 1st. So the one for next year is already out there. Now, keep in mind right now, it has 2 FAFSAs, 2 Dream Acts out there. There's the one for this current year, which is the 2021 FAFSA or Dream Act. And then the one for next fall, spring, because we're on academic years, is the 21-22. So if you're a senior now, you would want to do the 21-22 FAFSA and Dream Act. And you want to get that in by March 2nd, because that's the priority deadline for Cal Grant. Now, it's also the priority deadline for Stan State. Each school has a priority deadline. And some of the schools that are more prestigious, their priority deadline is much earlier. So you want to check with your school and see what is the date of the priority deadline for the FAFSA or Dream Act to be done. And then you want to make sure you get it in by then. If they don't have a priority deadline, make sure you get it in before March 2nd. So the FAFSA has something on it called the IRS data retrieval tool. It's something that assists the students in being able to fill out the FAFSA easier. And I highly recommend that if you can use the IRS data retrieval tool that you do. What it is you'll get to the part where you're going to have to put in tax information on the FAFSA for the parent and for the student. It will ask you if you want to use the IRS data retrieval tool, and you do want to try. So you'll click on that. It will actually take you to the IRS website and you will give them permission and they will fill in most, if not all, of the tax information for you, which is really good because that's the part that a lot of people kind of are stressed out about. They want to make sure they get the right ones. They get kind of confused by the lines. The questions are pretty clear where to get the information, but it's just always better to use the IRS data retrieval tool. The other reason why I would want you to use the IRS data retrieval tool is 30% of the FAFSAs and Dream Acts are selected for verification. It's a process where financial aid administrators like myself have to go in and double check certain data elements. And a lot of it is the tax information. Now, if the student used the IRS data retrieval tool, we actually don't have to check that information because we know it's correct because it came directly from the IRS. Okay, so that actually speeds up the process. Now, some of the grants that I talked about earlier, that's the free money. We only have limited amounts, like the State University grant, our institutional money. We don't have unlimited funds. So the sooner you get awarded, the more money you would potentially get. Because if we run out of that money, you may be eligible, but not get it because you didn't get awarded early enough. So you don't want anything that's going to delay your file. So if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, it actually helps you get awarded sooner. In my experience, students who use the IRS data retrieval tool, they get awarded about 2 weeks earlier than students who did not. And the reason for that is the students who did not use IRS data retrieval tool have to submit tax documents if they're selected for verification. And then we have to go through them and we have to double check everything. Usually there's something on there that we have to correct. That correction process takes about 2 weeks because we have to send it out to the central processor and wait for it to come back before we can award the student. So if you can use the IRS data retrieval tool, I highly recommend that you do. There are some people who cannot use the IRS data retrieval tool, and those would be, there's various so then you would not be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool for that. So, and there's other times you can't use it and I can't figure out why. Like I did, I worked with my son and did his FAFSA, and I was able to do the IRS data retrieval tool for mine, but not for his. So, and I don't know why. Sometimes you have to make sure that you put in the exact address that you used on your taxes. And sometimes it doesn't match up, so it doesn't let you. I don't know. Okay, so next. All right, so on the FAFSA, to sign it, you have to do what's called an FSA ID. And the FSA ID is how you're going to log into your FAFSA. It's how you're going to track your FAFSA. It's also how you're going to sign your FAFSA. It's going to how you're going to use the data retrieval tool. Let me just get this off the screen. I don't know if you can see it or not. But it's going to keep coming up until I log in. So sorry about that. I don't know how to turn it off. So the FSA ID is something that the student has to have, and then one parent. So the parents may already have the FSA ID if they have been a student and done a FAFSA, or if there's other students in this household, like you have brothers or sisters that have already gone to college, that would be the same FSA ID. The parents don't need a new FSA ID. So you would go to this website that's on the screen and you would make your FSA ID. Now, what I highly recommend is that you write down your ID number and your PIN and even the security questions that it asks and the answers, and then keep them in a safe place, because every year you have to do your FAFSA or DREAM Act, and every year you're going to need this FSA ID. And we all have tons of passwords and numbers we have to remember. So I would say keep it in a safe place, maybe take a picture of it as well so you have it in multiple places, because it's really frustrating when you get to the next year and you don't remember what your ID is or your password. So for the DREAM Act and the FAFSA, there are common mistakes that happen. And so I just want to go over what those are so you don't make them, because I don't want you to cost yourself any delay, so that which would cost money, or maybe cause yourself to have less money because you answered something incorrectly. So the first thing on here is name and social security number. The FAFSA does number of links to double check that, like it checks things with Homeland Security, with the Social Security database. So your name, date of birth, and social security number have to match exactly with the Social Security database. So you may need to find your Social Security card and find out what is the actual name on your Social Security card. Because if you have gone by Kiki your whole life, but your real name is Julio, you have to actually do the FAFSA under the name Julio, okay? Also, if you have multiple last names like Lopez Contreras, You need to know if both last names are on your Social Security card. Is there a hyphen in between them? Sometimes the double last names like that, one of the last names is the put in the middle name slot. So you need to know that. If your last name is Lopez Contreras, but on the Social Security card it's only Lopez, you would only apply for FAFSA under Lopez. So it has to match exactly. And then I would take it a step further. When you're doing your applications for your colleges, you need to use the same name, because a lot of schools only load FAFSAs for students who are admitted to their school. Like Stan State does that, because a lot of people put Stan State on their FAFSA and then they never apply. So we only load FAFSAs for students who've been admitted. So if you applied on your admissions application as Tim, but your name on your Social Security card and what you do on your FAFSA is Timothy, we're never going to load that, because we don't have a Timothy that has been admitted. We have Tim. So make sure that when you're doing your admissions application, you're using that Social Security name, your official name as well. And then when you're doing your application for specifically CSUs, make sure that you put your Social Security number on the admissions application. It says that it's not required, but if you want it to match up with your FAFSA or your DREAM Act, you have to have that Social Security number on there, okay? Then the other thing that's confusing to people is if a student is dependent or independent, and a dependent student has to put parent information on their FAFSA, and an independent student does not. So that's the difference. But how do you determine if you're dependent or independent? Most of you will be dependent. The main ways that students are not dependent, it's going to ask a bunch of questions in the dependency part, yes, no questions, to determine if you're dependent or independent. The main ones that people are usually become independent by are, there's a question that says, were you born before January 1st? And then there's a year. And every year that year on that question changes. In essence, you're 24. So then you would become independent. So just be aware, parents, that until the student is 24 or can answer yes to one of the other dependency questions, such as they're married, in a master's program, have a dependent that they financially support more than 50%, they will have to put parent information on the FAFSA, no matter if they live with you or if you are actually providing any financial support. By federal definition, they are still dependents and would have to put their they would have to put parent information on the FAFSA to get any financial aid. And on the question about if you have a dependent that you're financially supporting more than 50%, keep in mind that if the student is living with their parents and the student has a child, if they're living with their parents, they are probably not going to be able to say yes to that question, because the parents are providing room and board, utilities, and a lot of the information. So they would have to prove that they make enough income to financially support that child more than 50% to be able to say yes and be independent. So since most of you will have to put parent financial information on the FAFSA, which parent are you going to put? If your parents are separated or they're divorced or they were never married and don't live together, which parent are you going to put? So how to determine that is not which parent puts you on their taxes, because tax law is completely different than FAFSA rules. It's not who provides more financial support. It's who the student lived with more during the last year. So who does the student live with? And I always get the question, well, we have 50-50 custody. Well, there's 365 days during the year. So you lived with one parent more than the other, and that's the parent's household that is going to show up on the FAFSA. If you have not lived with your parent recently, then it would be which parent did you live with last? Now, grandparents, aunts and uncles, foster parents are not going to show up on a FAFSA ever. The only parents' information that's going to show up on the FAFSA would be a biological parent, and if they're remarried, the step parent, or an adopted parent. Okay, it's never going to be the grandparents, even if you live with the grandparents. Okay, now one of the questions does ask about legal guardianship. Are you in a legal guardianship? If you answer yes to that, it has to be legal guardianship that you went to the court and got court documents, because you're going to have to provide those court documents to the college to prove that you actually were in legal guardianship. Now, so if you just have been living with an aunt or uncle or grandparent and you have a notary that for the high school purposes or whatever purposes gave legal guardianship or guardianship to the grandparent or the aunt and uncle, and it's just done by a notary, that's not the same. You have to have actually gone to the court and have court documents showing that you're the legal guardian to be able to say yes to that. If you were in a legal guardianship where you have the court documents, then you wouldn't put any parent information, and you would not put the legal guardian's information either, because you would be considered independent. Okay, so once you determine which parent's information, if that parent, like I said, is remarried, you're also going to include the step parent's income and financial information, because it's the whole household. And then another thing that's confusing is who's in the household. The FAFSA is going to ask, first it's going to put the student in the household, because the student's always in the household, so that'll automatically populate. It'll put how many parents, because you've already by that point answered if the parents are married or single, and so the FAFSA already knows how many parents are in the household. And then it's going to ask for siblings. So those are the siblings that the parent is financially supporting more than 50%. So if the sibling is, 30 and they have their own job, then they would not be included, even if they still live with the parents. Okay, so it's who they financially support. And then it will ask how many of those people in the household are in college. And you would put the student and then any of the other siblings that are in college. Parents in college don't count in number in college. Another mistake that happens a lot is not signing. Every time you go in and make a correction and resubmit the FAFSA or DREAM Act, you have to sign it, and the parent has to sign it if the student is dependent. So if we get a FAFSA that does not have a parent signature on it, there's nothing we can do with it because it's not official. So make sure if you go back in to correct your FAFSA, that everyone that is required to sign it signs it every time. Okay? And then make sure that you review all the information. On the FAFSA, the screen before you get to the signature will have a transcript of everything that you put. So don't just skip past that page. Actually look at it. Make sure you didn't add any extra zeros. Make sure that you answered everything completely. Make sure that it is actually accurate before you move on. And then if a parent doesn't have a social security number, they're going to put all zeros on the FAFSA. Do not use a tax ID number. You are going to just put all zeros. It's not a problem if they don't have a social security number. If both parents don't have social security numbers, they're not going to be able to use the FSA ID. So when you get to the end where I said you sign with the FSA ID, those parents are going to have to print out a signature page and have it mailed in. So you don't want to wait until March 2nd to do your FAFSA. If you're in that situation, you want to do it sooner, because you have to mail that signature page in, and that takes a little while because the mail takes a while. But you also want to make sure that you double check everything so you don't have to go back in and make corrections, because like I said, every time you make corrections, you have to sign it again. So you would have to print that page and mail it in. So that's why that's really important, especially for parents that don't have social security numbers. Okay, so the financial aid process. So you file your FAFSA or your California DREAM Act. You're going to get an email to the email that you put on your FAFSA, and make sure the email that you put on your FAFSA and you do your FSA ID is not your high school email, because you're going to lose access to that once you graduate. You need to set it, if you don't have another email, set up an email, a Gmail, Hotmail, something like that, to use for the financial aid purposes. You will get an email 3 to 5 days after you file your FAFSA stating that it had been processed. You want to then go back in and you want to check your student aid report, the SAR, just double check again that you have everything listed as it should be. It will then also give you notes. You want to read the student aid report notes. That's the first place you're going to find if you were selected for that verification, like I said, where you have to turn in additional documents. If you see on there that you're selected for verification, you want to make sure that you pay attention to the emails that you're getting more so, and find out from the school how they're going to contact you. If you need additional documents, where do I find those forms? How do I submit the forms? When is the deadline for the forms? You need to find out all that information. And you would be able to tell that in the notes. Also, once you start college and you have started getting financial aid, those notes like next year will tell you if you got Pell, because you can only get Pell Grant for 6 years. It will actually tell you on there how many years you've gotten Pell. So you'll know right where you're at and you'll know exactly how much you have left. So it'll say, oh, you've received Pell from between 2 and 2.5 years or whatever. So you can kind of gauge how much longer you have Pell Grant, because some types of financial aid like Pell Grant does run out. So you're going to get that. Then you'll get contacted by the schools, usually by your email, because most colleges, if not all colleges, set up an email for you when you apply. So at CSU Stan, we have csustan.edu is our email. That's where the colleges are going to contact you. So you want to make sure that you check those on a regular basis. If you need to turn in additional documents, like Stanislaus, we email you and we put it on your to-do list, which is on your student portal. You want to get those to the schools as soon as you find out that you need them. Don't wait for the deadlines, because if you wait for the deadlines, it's going to delay your file. So like for Stanislaus, the computer requires that we put a deadline in there, and usually we make it June 1st. Well, if you wait till June 1st to submit your documents, you're not going to be awarded until probably late July by that point, because we have so many documents coming in to process. Well, you need to make your decision on what school you're going to May 1st. So obviously you're not going to know what your financial aid is. So you really want to get those documents to us as soon as possible. And that way too, after we get the documents, a lot of times we need additional documents. So you need to save time for that to go back and forth, get your file complete, and then you're going to be awarded. So then you're going to compare those awards. So let's say you are thinking about going to MJC, UOP, or Stanislaus, because you should always consider Stanislaus. So how are you going to determine which school to go to? Is it which school gives you the most grants? No, it's actually not. It's which school the out-of-pocket cost, which is the lowest out-of-pocket cost. That's how you're going to determine which is the best award. So you need to think about how much you're going to have to pay out of pocket. Now, let's say you're thinking about some East Coast school. You also need to realize you have to get there, maybe get home for Thanksgiving, all that. So you need to add those costs in as well, because they may not be included in the cost of attendance. So let's say you're considering those 3 schools that I mentioned, and you have been awarded a $5,000 Pell Grant. Okay, Pell Grant is a federal grant. It'll be the same at all 3 of the schools. So I have a $5,000 Pell Grant. At UOP, that's not going to go very far, because UOP has a really high cost of attendance because it's a private school. But at Stanislaus, $5,000 Pell Grant is going to pay for most of the tuition fee for the academic year. But at MJC, it'll pay for all of the fees. You may, and also probably your books, and you may even get some money for other expenses. So you need to look at that. You need to look at what is the out-of-pocket cost. Then you determine where you're planning on going, and you're going to accept that award. Your award is not going to pay out until you are enrolled in courses, and then you need to find out from your school, when are they going to disperse the award, and how are they going to do it? Some schools do it a week before the semester starts. Stanislaus does it about a week before the semester starts. Other schools do half at the beginning of the semester and half after the last day to add and drop classes. So each school is a little different. So find out, how am I going to get my money? When am I going to get my money? Is there anything I need to do, like set up a direct deposit, or what do I need to do? Find out that information as well. So your financial aid pays out, and then next year it all starts again. October 1st, the application becomes available, and you need to apply every year. Don't forget to apply. So I just wanted to put this slide up because I know that there's a lot of talk about the community colleges, the 2 years full-time free program. And I just wanted you to not count out a CSU UC private school until you actually have applied and then get the financial aid award. Because, like for the example, the first column, and the EFC, that's the number we get from the application for a 0 EFC, and this is only 3 grants we're considering. There's loans, there's other grants, there's scholarships, but I'm just looking at these 3 grants. And for the 0 EFC, the Pell Grant is over $6,000, and the Cal Grant B is over $7,000 for a total of $13,759 for the whole year. Now, the tuition and fees at CSU Stanislaus is $7,606 for the whole year. So that means that the student is going to, after their tuition and fees are paid, have $6,153 to buy books, to pay for other educational expenses, and that kind of thing. So even an EFC that's $5,000, so that's quite a jump. A $5,000 EFC still would get some Pell Grant, State University grant for $5,742, with the fees being $7,606. The student would only have to pay $569. Now that's for the whole year, and you only pay semester by semester. So you would only have to come up with at one time half of that amount. And that's, again, I'm only putting 3 different potential grants there. There's other aid available. So I'm just making it, I just wanted to make the point that CSUs, UCs, private schools can be attainable with financial aid. 87% of our students have some type of financial aid at CSU Stanislaus, and other schools are very similar to that. Okay, so the world we live in right now is not the world that we're used to. It's different. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about special circumstances. So the FAFSA that you're filling out, the 21-22 FAFSA, is based on 2019 information, financial information and all that. So the world is very different now than it was in 2019. A lot of people have lost their job, been laid off. Things are different. So you will still fill out the FAFSA with the 2019 information. But if your life is drastically different, like let's say your parent has lost their job and their income in 2020 is drastically different than 2019, what you can do is you can file for a special circumstance. Now, this has to be done with the school that you're planning on attending. If you're planning on going to UC Merced, I can't help you with that. You would have to actually contact them. There's going to be forms to turn in, documentation, that kind of thing. But I just wanted to let you know that there are options for us to be able to try and make your FAFSA look more like your financial situation currently is, realistically is, so that it is a more accurate depiction. I just don't want you to think, oh, well, you know, we're not going to get any money because we made a lot of money in 2019, but your dad lost his job, so I'm sorry you can't go to school. Please look into the special circumstance. We may be able to help you through that. Another really common special circumstance, or professional judgment as we call them, is students who are not considered independent by those questions that we were talking about, the yes/no questions. But let's say their parents, they don't know where they are, they don't have any idea where they are, or there is a severe estrangement where there would be they would be put in harm's way to get the information. So that would be a professional judgment, a special circumstance you would have to file with the school. And again, you would have to turn in documentation. What you would do on your FAFSA is you would fill it out, and when it asks you if you're going to provide parent information, you would say you aren't going to. It's going to ask you 3 or 4 times. You keep saying you're not going to, but then, and you submit it, but then be aware that you're going to have to work with the college to get that completed, because you're going to have to go through their process, or your FAFSA is not going to be official and they won't be able to award you. So you will go ahead and submit the FAFSA without parental information, and then you would do the special circumstance process. Now, each school is going to make their own judgments on that. So you may go to a community college and they will go ahead and give you a dependency override, as we call them. But then you go to another school and they make a different decision because they have different policies on it. So just be aware, it may or may not be the same from one school to the other. These are professional judgments made by that school. They do not translate to another school. So make sure that you file your FAFSA or DREAM Act by March 2nd. Keep copies of anything that you submit to the offices. Make sure you double check your student aid report to make sure you didn't make any corrections or need to make any corrections. And then if you don't understand something, there's lots of information on the web, lots of really good websites to go to, but ask questions. Your high school counselors can be a really great resource for asking questions. The college you're planning on attending, ask questions. There's lots of different places, but don't just go, I don't understand, ask questions. So it's time to hand it back over to Modesto City School. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for all that wonderful information regarding scholarships, grants, and applying for FAFSA. This brings us to the end of the presentation, and we would now like to share some resources with everyone, and then we'll move on to our Q&A session. The last slide of this presentation will also have our department contact information for further parent assistance. For our class schedules and much more, you can go to Modesto City Schools website and click on the new Parent and Student Help Centers. Please take time to explore the new Parent and Student Help Centers. One is specifically for parents and the other is for students. These new sites provide how-to videos and trainings for our most used applications, and there is much more to explore for parent and student help and support. Once you click on the Parent and Student Help Centers, if you scroll to about the middle of the page, you'll find these parent tools. Here are the guides and how-to videos for PowerSchool, Go School Messenger, and Schoology. These are Modesto City Schools' most utilized applications during distance learning. Once you have clicked on Parent and Student Help Centers, it will bring you to this webpage. You can click on the training calendar and it will take you to the upcoming classes. After clicking on the training calendar, it will bring you to here where I've highlighted today's date. Here you can find scheduled parent classes, and by clicking on any of the meetings in the calendar, you'll find the link to join the meeting. In addition, please feel free to explore this webpage as well. Our Department of Student, Parent, and Community Support will post our upcoming parent classes on this page. We would now like to share our upcoming classes. We'll be covering how to create a PowerSchool account for parents and navigation basics on November 23rd at 9:30 a.m. And finally, we'll close out November by sharing information about Snapchat as the last part of our 3-day social media series on November 30th at 2:30 p.m. We would also like to share 2 community events for free flu shots during the season. The first will be at Downey High School on November 30th from 3 to 6 p.m., and the second event will be at Johansen on December 4th from 3 to 6 p.m. And there is no need to write this information down. All information regarding our parent virtual classes and events will be on the training calendar. At this time, we will take a few questions and answer them to the best of our abilities. If you haven't already, please type your question into the chat or click into the chat and ask your question. Thank you. And so, Tammy, our first question is, how would divorce affect the FAFSA parent income?
So if your parents are divorced, you're going to put on the marital status divorced or separated. And you're going to determine, like I was saying, which parent's information you're going to put. It's which parent you live with. So that is the parent that is going to show up on the FAFSA as their financial. The other parent is not, their financial information is not going to show up on the FAFSA. So if the parents are divorced, you're going to use the parent that the student lives with, and that's the parent that's going to put information on the FAFSA. That's the parent that's going to sign the FAFSA as well.
Thank you. The second question is, can a senior apply for 21-22 FAFSA right now? If a parent does it, what would we list for the question of GPA?
Okay, on the FAFSA, there's no GPA question. And you would do the 21-22 FAFSA now for next year. So this is the time to do it. So you're not going to have to worry about GPA. Like I said, for the only time we talked about GPA was for the Cal Grant, and your school has already submitted that or will be submitting that, and they know how to calculate it. They know what years to use, what classes to use. They take care of all that. You don't have to worry about it. But the GPA does not show up on the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application.
Thank you for the clarification. And our third question is, what if you're a student's guardian? Would this be considered as an independent or dependent student?
It all depends on if it's a legal guardian. So like I was talking about, if the student is you've gone to the courts, the student is now, by the courts determined, has a legal guardian, then they would put, yes, they have a legal guardian, and they would not put any parent information on the FAFSA. If you have not gone to the courts and it's just an understanding of legal guardian without any kind of going to the courts, then you would still have to put parent information on it. You would not put the legal guardian. So in no instance would you put anyone's financial information other than a biological or step parent or an adoptive parent. You're not going to put a legal guardian's financial information on the FAFSA you're never going to do that.
Okay, and it looks like that may have answered our next question, which was, if the parent has a roommate that is a co-owner of the home who is not financially responsible for the student, is their financial information included?
No, because a roommate does not have, only if they're married would they then have some financial information show up on the FAFSA. A roommate situation, they're not part of the household. You're not going to include them as part of the household, nor are you going to include their dependents. So if it's a roommate situation and both roommates, your parent and the other roommate, have like kids, you're only going to put your parents' dependents, not the roommate or their kids. They're not part of the household.
Thank you. And this will be our last question, Tammy. Is applying for FAFSA mandatory?
No, you don't have to apply for it, but we highly recommend it. You cannot get financial aid without applying. You can't even get loans without applying for the FAFSA, and some scholarships even require it. So we highly recommend that you do it. I always get the question, how much can I make and still get it? Oh, I shouldn't apply because I'm not going to get anything. People say that all the time. You don't know that. There's the middle class scholarship for CSUs or UCs that are grants. It's free money for students who their parents make a lot of money, so they're not eligible for any other grants. So There's lots of money out there, but you can't get any if you don't apply. I always recommend that you do it, even if you think you're not going to get anything. Well, what if you're right? It only takes a little while to apply, but you might be wrong, and you definitely want to apply. But it's not mandatory. You don't have to do it.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for clarifying all of those questions that our parents had during this presentation. And to our parents, we would like to let you know that her contact information is on screen if you would like to take a picture for further questions. I will allow a few seconds before continuing on. And thank you again, Tammy. And finally, here is our department contact information. Please feel free to contact us for any questions that you may have or questions not answered during this presentation. Also, don't forget to fill out the survey to give us feedback and share with us your recommendations for future and parent classes and topics. The survey link will be posted in the chat. Once again, we thank you for joining us today. Goodbye, everyone. Take care, and we will see you for our next presentation.